everybody, and welcome to the Star in Focus podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Oakes, and with us we have Bill Roberts. Hi, Bill. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Deanna. How are you?
I'm doing good. You look fantastic. The Christmas tree and the bow tie. What a wonderful setup you have.
Trying to get my energy level up to you. You always do so great on these. I told my wife I'm going to try and just look good and put the Christmas tree in the background and get into the season.
I love it. Let the spirit lift you, right? It's just
Right.
there's magic in the air, I feel like. So let's go ahead and get started, Bill, and have you, get yourself acclimated here, or let our viewers know who you are and where you've been in your business in our industry. So, how did you get started in the court reporting industry?
Well, mine's kind of a funny story, but I'll preface it with this to say that I was 16 years old when I was introduced to the reporting industry, and I was in a car wreck. And so I had my deposition taken, and two things I remember about the deposition. One was the court reporter, and the other was how slack my Allstate lawyer was. So my lawyer came up about 5 minutes before it was supposed to start, and he said, gave me a couple of hokey instructions like yes and no, and don't expand too much. And so
Yeah.
we went into the deposition suite, and there was this male court reporter in there, and he had this young lady with him. And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Well, that's the court reporter. He makes all the bucks." So at 16 years old, I thought, he's the court reporter. He makes all the bucks, and he gets to take that cute girl with him wherever he goes. That's the job for me. So I signed up for court reporting school at the end of high school. At the time, I was working as a marine mechanic, and I loved that job. And I was back and forth if I should do court reporting, and I thought, it's too feminine. I'm not going to do it. So I decided against reporting, moved down to South Florida, was a fireman and marine mechanic, and my first wife didn't like the schedule on the fire department, so I told her about court reporting and quit my job and moved to Jacksonville, Florida, to Thyra Ellis's school, and had to learn both keyboards at the same time. And to get out of Thyra school, you had to do three 225 literaries. It's faster
Oh
than
my
the
gosh,
children.
really?
Yeah, yeah. So they said,
Wow.
I'll never make it. I couldn't spell, I couldn't type, but I said, not only am I going to make it, I've got 2 years worth of money and I'm going to finish in two. So that's the short version of how I got into reporting.
Good for you. What a way to just show them what's up, Because people always want to make determinations for us, and it's like, I can do whatever I want to do.
It was challenging, but it was great. I really enjoyed court reporting school, and I love court reporting.
Yeah, I'll say you've been in it for a hot minute. Yeah, I mean,
Just a
you
little.
you don't even actually report anymore, right?
No, I had to give up reporting, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. My wife Karen, who's a court reporter, she ran the company, and then when our boys were little, she wanted to be home with them, and I thought, I'll just come in and run the office for a little bit, and I'll have it all figured out and be back out reporting, and that was kind of my downfall. After that, you just can't run a big firm and report. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard to do both for sure, to be employee and owner, and yes, absolutely. I can
Right.
imagine that was challenging. So now what's your role in our industry?
Well, in 2019, our company joined forces with Veritext, and I'm what Veritext calls a principal, and I do a lot of different things. I still look at our calendar and make sure it's balanced with the reporters. I help with the just the office staff and public relations. My son David, he's a court reporter as well, and he is head of sales for North and South Carolina, director of sales. And my middle son, Mike, he's a regular reporter for Veritex, so we kind of keep it in the family.
I'll say, yeah, you, your wife, two of your sons, that's amazing. It's really
Right.
nice too, because I feel like sometimes I'm so isolated and no one in my family or my friend group even knows what I'm talking about. So it's kind of nice that you have a little nest of people that you can kind of, have some banter with and talk about
Yeah,
the
you can come for Christmas dinner and we'll talk about briefs, something real exciting.
briefs are honestly my best friend. There was a point in school where my instructor was like, you can't just make a brief for every single word. That's impossible. But like that is really where, because I really am of the family, the fewer strokes, the better. So, for a long time, I just had like a whole list of index cards, and I would just sit like while I was watching TV or something and briefs and, read a book because I was determined. And I still do use a lot of briefs, but you know, you got to have some foundation to work on too.
It's each his own. You know, I know when I first started, we wrote short vowels. We didn't have long vowels. So when I first went on the computer in like the mid '80s, I had to revamp my whole writing style. And
Wow.
yeah, it
So
was.
you were already working, you mean? You basically
Oh
started
yeah,
over?
yeah. I mean, we had the Baron computers. They were very expensive, and you had to share time on them, and it was a challenge. It was a great time though.
Wow, that's incredible. Good for you for sticking it out. I just feel so, I can't even imagine, just all of the things that it took. And I guess we could say that for a lot of different industries, right? We've just come so far. And then you think about what people had to go through, like the rotary phone, it's like you had to wait.
Hey, wasn't that before you were born, the rotary phone?
Hey, my grandmother had one. So, I mean, but we thought it was like a toy. We really enjoyed playing with it. And a girlfriend of mine, her grandmother had one of those ones that's on the wall, which I think is so cool. I would love it if we could connect like a cell phone or something to one of those at the house. Wouldn't you
Well,
use it? Doesn't it seem fun?
legend has it in the Roberts family that my grandfather, who was a lineman for the New York Telephone Company, invented the piece to make the phone one because he couldn't hold on to the pole too good. Now, nobody in the family ever saw it, but he didn't get any money for it. But he invented the piece to make it one.
I love that. A little bit of family trivia. That's
Right.
amazing. So, what do you think in your long career of court reporting is one of your favorite memories?
Well, I don't. I've got several, but probably the highlight of my career was I was doing a lot of work with a good friend of mine who's passed away, the late Ron Motley. And Ron started doing asbestos work and then went on and spearheaded all the tobacco litigation. And so I traveled with Ron pretty much all over the country doing depositions and was on the plane with Jeffrey Wigand, the whistleblower, and just did a lot of cool cases with Ron.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you travel internationally or was it mostly domestic?
Well, tobacco litigation was in the States, but I did travel the world. I did depositions in Scotland and London, and I had a good run at it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, how did you share with our listeners? How did you break into that? I mean, I'm assuming that was it just the luck of the draw and somebody you worked with needed to go overseas, or how did that happen?
Well, God has His hand in certain things, the way it works out. But when I first started, I was an official court reporter, and I was working in state court. And one of the law clerks, a good friend of mine, Charles Patrick, he was going out into practice, and he said, "I'm going to work with these guys, Blott and Fales." And I said, "Who are they?" And he said, "Well, they're out of Barnwell, South Carolina." And I said, "You'll never make any money with them. You're making a huge mistake." And so, sure enough, he left, and I was still working at the courthouse. And I went to visit him at his office, and it was a three-story walk-up. Didn't even have an elevator. I said, "See, I told you you made a huge mistake." And about a year after that, I opened up my firm. It was just me. I remember I had a lease on a building that had, old ATO fraternity house, and I used to just pick up the phone, check, make sure it still had a dial tone, because I was waiting for the phone to ring.
Right.
Anyway, about my second year in, Charles Patrick calls me up, and he says, "Bill," he said, "right now I'm working with Blott and Fail, same guy, Ron Molly and all those guys." And he said, "We're handling all the asbestos litigation nationally, and you're our guy." And that was it. I had the asbestos litigation for the whole country on the plaintiff side, and it was just such a blessing.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. Good for you. And so when it came to traveling internationally, was that in the same vein? Was it just with that same, case or whatever, that same litigation that you ended up going over there? How would that happen?
Yeah, well, on the state side, I had to form a network of court reporting firms that cover all the work, so I had to like vet out different firms around the country. But internationally, who wouldn't jump at going on an international case? And I remember the first time going to London, everybody said, I talked to some other reporters who'd done international work in London, said, well, they won't let you in without a work visa. So you have to ship your machine over FedEx ahead of time before you go. And so you'd
Oh,
ship your machine to the hotel, and because they don't want to give up the work to the Americans.
interesting. So, but I don't understand why you wouldn't take it with you. I don't get why you send it
Well,
before.
if they checked you in customs coming in, they want to know what you were doing. Other people said they said, well, I'm a court reporting student. I'm practicing, but they didn't want you to take the work from the English court reporters.
Interesting. So they might like just hold you up in customs or take your rider or something?
I didn't have that, but it was what I heard. Last thing I wanted to do was not be showing up for a deposition overseas, so I shipped my machine ahead of time. Now, when I went to Scotland, there were no issues. Just went right through customs. Everything was great.
Well, that's good. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have only traveled with my rider maybe twice, and it's always very stressful, I feel like, because I feel like it's a Fabergé egg in there or something. And then I also have gotten stopped in uh, security, and they have no idea what it is, and all of that is, stuff that I'd rather not deal with. But I know that it's, an issue or can be, especially if people don't know what's in there and they just see a mechanism or a machine. So I can imagine 30, 40 years ago that they might raise some, alarms, this piece of machinery that's not a lot of people recognize, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, when we did the tobacco litigation, at that point they had their own private jets, and it was,
ooh.
yeah. So that was, you get pretty spoiled when you're flying on a corporate jet like that. I mean, you don't have to wait in line. You skip the runway line, everything. It was great.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've never been on a private jet. See, folks, this is why you got to get into court reporting. Talk about
Right, right,
luxury. That
right.
is amazing. So, where was your favorite place that you got to travel? If you can pick one, I know that might be kind of hard.
Um, You know, one part of my issue too was I'd travel these places and I wouldn't put any time on the front end or back end, and so I'd be in deposition suites. But I did a lot of work down in the Caribbean, and that was a fun time too. And it's always beautiful down there. I did work in Canada and California, so I don't know if I have a favorite place. I was always like heads down on doing daily copy and getting work out.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it might be hard if you're traveling on someone's private jet. You can't exactly say, "Oh, I'm going to stay a few days, so it's kind of like sometimes you have to maybe, take it for what it's worth. But what a great experience, anyways, just to be able to travel, I think is so amazing.
I'll tell
It's
you a funny story. So I did the first tobacco litigation deposition in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was at the Brown and Williamson building. And so I flew up on the jet, and of course I was with the plaintiff, so the defense guys didn't care much for me. And I was going to fly back commercial because my parents were having their 50th wedding anniversary in Florida. And so the I got to the checkout or the check-in at the airport, and they said, well, it's snowing, and you're not going to get out of here. The airport's been closed. And so I was just, oh gosh, I'm going to miss my parents' 50th. My sisters are going to kill me. And there, over the intercom comes Ron Motley. And I pick up the phone and he goes, I need a draft of that transcript. So I said, hey, I'm stuck. The airport's closed. I said, have you left yet? He goes, no. I said, can I get on the plane with you guys and go back to Charleston? So he said, no, we're going to New Orleans. He said, but get on the plane anyway in New Orleans and we'll get you back to Florida. So I get on the plane, and they had their own in-house travel agent, who I later hired to be our scheduling coordinator. Anyway, so
Oh, wow.
They put Valerie on the phone, and she goes, "Don't you worry. You just show up at the airport in New Orleans with your Louisville, Kentucky ticket, and they're going to say, yes, sir, Mr. Robertson. You're going to fly right to Florida," which I did. And of course, I lost my luggage, but yeah, so it's crazy.
Something has to go wrong, right? But that is amazing. What a great story. So you got to make the anniversary party, I imagine.
Right, right.
Oh, how wonderful. And 50 years, man, congratulations to them. That is remarkable. I
Yeah,
can't
it was a
believe
fun
that.
time.
That's great. So what do you have as far as, like advice? If you maybe grandkids or nieces and nephews, for somebody that wants to know, about the court reporting industry as a profession, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I would say, as far as steno reporting goes, if I can make it through court reporting college, then anybody can. I mean, and and through hard work. I mean, at
Yes.
Thyra School at 3225 literaries, you had to pass them over 99%. Otherwise, you were kind of
Holy smokes. Oh
yeah.
my
And so
gosh.
and I remember because my first lessons, theory lessons I had a hand, and I wrote them out in pencil because I didn't know how to type. So learning both keyboards was a real challenge. But and I came from a bunch of blue collar workers out of New York City, and to go on and travel the world as a court reporter, it's just anything's possible if you put your mind to it.
Most definitely. And yeah, I can't even imagine both of the both of the keyboards at the same time and 99%. That's crazy. For those of you that may not know what he means when he says literary, that means literally a monologue. One person is just talking, as opposed to when you do a question answer, you have a lot of shortcuts, and so it's easier to write. But like that sort of dense content is challenging. And 99%. So were you taking like speed contests all over after you graduated?
Well, it was always my dream to enter into a speed contest, and I never did. I just was too busy working. Of course, I went on to pass my merit, but that was one of my regrets that I never participated in any of the speed contests. I remember in school, we'd always look at the magazines and see everybody's notes. We'd see the Cohen brothers, Bill and Arnold Cohen, and back when Ed Varala was a young guy competing against them, and they were winning. I just always wanted to compete in a speed contest, but never did.
That's such is life. If that's your only regret, right? That's not too shabby. And you probably could have handled them. I mean, 99% out of 225 literary, that's blowing my mind. That is
Well,
just
there were a lot of focus on literary, but Q&A, it took me a bit to get my Q&A where I needed to be, even to pass the merit. I mean, the Q&A was hard for me because I was a literary
yeah.
writer. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. And see me again with those briefs. I mean, I have just everything as what do they even call? I don't even remember what they call them. Like a short form, but your answer and your question. What are those called? I
I
don't.
know what you're talking about. My middle son does those. I tried to do them. I couldn't incorporate them.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, too much water under the bridge.
That's fair. And sometimes different people learn things different ways, right? So things that make
Right.
sense to me and vice versa. I mean, we all know that I think now. So whatever works for you. And that's what I try to tell people, it's like this makes perfect sense to me, but if it doesn't to you, then don't force it. I think that's maybe, some people try to, when they're in school, they try to write a certain way and you have to learn a foundation. And so for me, there were a lot of things that I struggled with and that added to my kind of time to figuring out how it was going to just reinforce it over and over. It took me a million years to graduate. I don't know if you know that, but it was very hard for me.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. There's been a lot of talk in the industry about that when they went to computers and Stenotype, that they made the theory so hard it was hard to graduate. Because back when I went, it was pretty much the norm, 2.5 years.
yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that they thought that digital transformation, not digital in the sense of digital reporters, but, the computer transformation made it harder. Do you know why?
Well, like things like early on in some of the computer theories, the suffixes were all second stroke words. So like the ed ending, where you could write it in one stroke when I was coming through, they made you second stroke everything, just so it would, suck up on the word, and like a delete space or a suffix ending and things like
Right.
that made it really difficult and slowed things down, is my understanding.
Got it. So instead of just adding it all in, you came back for that inflicted
Right.
ending, which is how I was taught actually,
Right.
because it's real-time writing, which is
Right.
why I am not a real-time writer. I have a ton of conflicts, but I'm okay with that. I can discern, did you go and dug, right? Like those are very easy. And I usually always use that analogy, and our software is amazing. But yeah, and it was just too stroke intensive. That was another thing that I just finally, I think I took Mark Kislingberry, seminar, or went to a seminar, and that's when I just started tucking those endings in, and it was a huge advantage for me, just because I guess my fingers don't move that fast. I'm not sure, but I can see how that makes it harder for sure. You're just stroking more.
Right.
So, what
Yeah.
was your theory? Do you remember what it was called?
Well, Thyra had her own theory, but it was, and I'm really showing my age now, but there was a theory called Barry Horn, and she kind of modified it a little bit and worked, I think, with Bill Cohen a little bit. And so, it was a real fast writing theory, but it was pre-computer, so there was short vowels, and I had to change a lot of stuff. But that's a thing too. I mean, I was able to pass the real-time test first shot out, and I remember when I took it, I flew up to Connecticut to take it. They weren't giving it in South Carolina. It was all live, and there were two ballrooms full of people taking the test, and only like out of the whole country, and that was just in Connecticut. Only out of the whole country is like maybe less than 10 people or 5 people passed the whole thing. I was one of them passed. So you don't have to have a total computer compatible theory. You can make changes if you work on it.
For sure. So was so much of your time, I mean, you said that you passed the real time right away, but you were on computer yet, right?
Well, no, I was on the computer at the point. I printed down my CV just so if you ask me any questions like that, I could try and figure out uh, when I took it because it's been that long ago. Uh, okay, so, oh yeah, so I passed my real-time test in 1995.
Okay, got it. And then so when did you actually transition from paper to computer to software? Do you remember or do you have it on your CV?
No, I don't have that on there, but it was like probably the mid to maybe like 86, 87. I could be a little wrong on
Oh,
that.
okay.
And I remember when I first got the computer, I had a cocktail party at the office. It was a small office, and like I said, an AOTO fraternity house. And I queued up this what a 300-page job, and it was printing, and it was this really slow printer, but it was computerized, so it would print back and forth, so it would go backwards. And I'd show all the attorneys. I said, "See, this is computer technology. It prints both ways." It was like a
That,
popcorn thing. Dot 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 dot. Dot.
right, right. State of the art, I'm sure, you
Oh,
know.
it was. It was. That was a big deal.
That's awesome. So did you have the cocktail party to celebrate going to a computer or were they just happening at the same
No, no,
time?
I did. I had a whole party to show my clients that I was like cutting edge ahead of everybody.
Good for you. That's a really good marketing ploy. I like that. I feel like that's a somewhere that I struggle in too is with the marketing. But that's brilliant. You know, you get to have a little party and show off your printer. How big was it? Do you remember?
It took up a good bit of the room. And my trainer, she's still with Stenograph now, I think, it was Gail Abrams. And
Oh, I
she,
feel like
uh, she said to me, we had the computer and we just got finished with training. She said, now you should just take a couple of regular jobs with this and go in easy. I said, no, we got a daily copy we're doing tomorrow when you leave. And so we did the daily on it. And I remember the hardest thing was we couldn't figure out how to separate the carbon paper. So our hands were all black and we were trying to, because they had machines to do it. But anyway, it's just a silly thing.
right. It was a learning process, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot
yeah.
of, yeah. That's so wild. I mean, that's amazing to see just the progression of how things have come about. So when you went from the paper to the computer, to, software based, was there a lot of fear in the industry? Do you remember people kind of being weary of that?
Well, it's kind of similar to some of the things we're going through now with DR and different capture methods. But I remember, we were concerned about, like my typist. I had a typist, and she was going to lose her job, and so things like that, and the expense of the computer. We had to work on shifts to go on the computer because it's so expensive. We had to like people come in at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning and have their shift on it. We all shared the same screen. It was like a little green screen. Uh, but and they were like, "Oh well, we don't know if these computers are going to work." And even on that daily, I remember the second day I came in and I said, "Well, what'd you think of the transcript?" And they said, "Well, it was okay." And we had a guy, his name was Mr. Mountain. He said, "You spelled my name wrong throughout the entire transcript because we globaled it in and dropped the N, and so it came out Mr. Mooten." That would never would have happened with the typist. I mean, not throughout the whole transcript.
Right, right. That's a very good point. Yeah. Which, I mean, the global is one of my absolute favorite things. But yeah, that's a very good point. And I was interested to know your typist, she had to learn theory then, right? Or was she also a court reporter? How did that work
Well,
out?
I had two different kinds of typists. I had note readers, and then I had dictation typists. So my note readers, they were working for other folks, and like the note reader I used when I was traveling a lot around the country before I went on the computer, she had plenty of work.
Oh, well, that's good. I mean, yeah, that makes sense to have somebody Because even just looking and writing, typing, I know that, you got to white things out or whatever if it was,
Oh yeah.
before computers. So I think having a note reader, and that makes sense, but that's staff you have to hire just to be able to get those daily copies out. I never even actually thought about that, but I mean, it makes sense.
You're lucky you didn't have to go through it. Dictation was the worst thing on the planet. It was so boring to have to redictate all your notes. Matter of fact, that's how the stenomask was invented. The He was a steno reporter and got behind on his dictation, so came up with the idea to just go into the courtroom and dictate straight while he was taking the testimony.
That makes a lot of sense. And I have never even heard about that, but that makes perfect sense to me because, yeah, it's cutting out one step of the process for sure. And there's not a lot of, voice writers out there. Do you have any kind of understanding as to how the voice? I mean, I know how it works. They speak into the mask, but like, I don't know how they use briefs as well, or do you know?
Well, I don't know now with the computerization of voice writing, but I know that when I was an official, I was president of the South Carolina Family and Circuit Court Reporters Association, which was a mixed group. There were steno reporters in there and voice writers, which is kind of an oxymoron. Voice writer, you're not really writing anything. Stenomaskers, whatever you want to call it. And I think that right now in our industry, there's a really big divergence on steno only and different capture methods. And so for me, way back then, I came to the realization pretty quick that it was more about the live reporter, not so much the capture. And of course, we were able to go to computerization way before the stenomaskers were. But they were good reporters too, and they fill the gap. And a lot of them, their certifications are faster than NCRA's. I mean, their RPR, I think they call it I forget what they call it, but they're equivalent to the RPR, and the merit is faster even than NCRA's, than ours. And the main thing they had back in the day, they had a free hand, so they could take notes.
Yeah.
Because they were, yeah.
Totally. I'm taking a case right now where somebody's pro se and they're like, can you mark this? And then they keep talking like, you don't understand what's happening with my hands right now. Like I need an extra set for sure. People don't
Right,
realize.
right.
Yeah. It's a lot to try to do all of that when you're just relying on your hands. The steno mask is very fascinating. I think, now that you're saying it, I can't believe we haven't had anybody on here that uses one. And so I think that's going to be my next journey.
I had a
Figure
friend of mine who was a stenomasker, and they said the only thing bad about it was if you went out the night before and had several drinks, some next morning when you were in that stenomasker, it was pretty rough in there with that alcohol bouncing back.
Oh yeah. Totally. That would suck.
No.
No bourbon.
But
Because that
the thing about the stenomask was that, and I never tried it or did it, but of course we're born. When we're born, we're learning how to talk constantly. So us, we have to take speech, convert it to steno, convert it out to steno, and then back into words that's on the computer and all that. And them, it's natural, so they can attain speed really quick.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm so, impressed by how it came about, and I definitely want to learn some more. I never even really like looked into anything about it. There's rarely any like attendees at seminars and stuff. I know they're out there, but now my interest has been piqued, and I want to learn some more about it. But definitely, I try to explain to people all the time, especially if somebody has an accent. While most accents are beautiful and knowing multiple languages is totally admirable, you're almost trying to translate it back into English, depending upon how heavy it is, and then you're translating it into shorthand. So I absolutely agree. It takes a lot of steps in order to get to where it comes out on the screen. And part of my problem is, whether or not you read it on the screen. I don't know if you do that, but oftentimes when I'm reading it as I'm writing, I might get caught up and then miss something. So I usually don't actually read it. I usually don't look at the screen. I think it just depends on the deposition, but that's not my go-to. What about you? Did you watch as you were writing?
I always watched it, and not so much reading it, but like I'd look up to see if I thought something was going to be a conflict or a word that didn't tran out, because it was a complex word or something like that. But I always took my laptop. from day one.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely have it for sure. Because unfortunately, I think one of the downfalls to having the computer is I'm not very good at reading notes anymore. So, the raw steno, if I didn't have my laptop and the software translating it and I had to read back, I would probably be very embarrassed because, yeah, it's one of those things. I guess don't use it, you lose it kind of a thing. How about you? Can you still read notes?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I always, owning a firm, you always had to know how different theories and everything in case you had to transcribe somebody else's work and you had an issue.
Oh, I didn't
Um,
even think of that you might have to do somebody else's work. That feels like it would be hard.
well, I mean, it depends. Depends on how good the reporter is.
That's fair. Yeah. But I mean, also if your theory doesn't match, right? Because that's one of the things that I find is like, even if there's like a quirky shirt or something, usually I can read something simple, no problem. But there's times where I'm like, that's not how I would write that. So it's interesting to me to see and to have the pressure of reading somebody else's notes. I would panic for sure, especially under pressure. That would not bode well for me.
My wife was a great reporter, but she was even a better scopus. We used to do daily copy, and she could actually be in the conference room at the other end of the table scoping the job while I was reporting it. And I don't know how she could do that. I mean, because me, I'm one of them type, if there's any background noise, I'm reading out loud, because I just can't concentrate. But
Yes.
she could finish, pretty much within, 20 minutes when they were done with the proceeding, just be done.
Wow. What a great team you two
Oh,
made.
we
That's
had so much
awesome.
fun. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Good for you. What an amazing story you have. That's very cool. Are you planning on leaving the industry anytime soon, or what are you thinking?
I don't know. I mean, my wife recently retired 2 years ago, but she's one of those. She's younger than me, but she's one of those that can stay busy. Me, I'm always a nervous wreck on what am I going to do. You know,
I see.
uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so I don't know. I'm 68 now, so maybe when I'm 70, I'll leave.
Well, no rush. I mean, you have a lot of expertise that we can definitely use. So I'm certainly not pushing you out the door by any means, but it's kind of interesting to see where you've come and where you are and maybe what you plan to do. You're on the star board for now, which is amazing, and I that's how I know you, obviously, but I'm very happy to have known you and learned what I have learned thus far. I'm sure I have many other things to learn from you, but yeah, it's great to look. I imagine, to have such a long career. I'm not quite there yet. I'm still a little bit of a baby reporter, but there's got to be so much pride in that. Yeah, I mean,
I'll give you an interesting fact. I was one of the few people that were on. I was usually on the Barron Users Group, which is really kind of was the forerunner to STAR. And when they first started with computers, we formed groups because we were trying to get the software right and had access to the developers. Well,
okay.
when Stenograph acquired Barron, we merged the two user groups, and that was the formation of STAR. So I was on the board of Barron and STAR, and 1994 is when they formed STAR.
That is so cool. I did not know that. And so, how many times have you been on the board? Do you?
No, this is just my second. I mean, I was on it for a pretty good run then, and that's when we called it the Society for the Technological Advancement of Reporters. We wanted to come up with something, that put us up there with the scientists and everything, I guess, and a little bit too
What
much.
kind of science? I mean, for sure. Is it just shorthand? It's a different language, all that. That's really cool. I didn't realize that you had been a part of it since its inception. And
And
how
that's
would you
what I
say?
would say to everybody out there that is considering STAR membership. That's one of the things that really also propelled my career and my business. I mean, the cutting edge stuff that I learned at STAR with direct contact with the programmers, the camaraderie that I built, and the networking that I formed with other agency owners really changed the trajectory of my career tremendously.
That's amazing to hear. And I definitely feel like there's so much networking opportunity and there's so much education opportunity, just being a part of all of the activities that we do and host. And I love it and I absolutely recommend it. And I think that my favorite thing about STAR is its inclusivity. I just cannot speak, enough about how important to me that kind of positive, you know, stance and just allowing everybody to have a place to come is just really, really important, especially now. I mean, I suppose people have been saying that since the beginning of time, right? It's always the sky is falling, but it definitely does feel like it's important now, very much so.
I think, like you said, we offer an inclusive place, and it's not a place we have to worry about people verbally assaulting you because you have an opinion or because you hire other people that might have a different capture method. And people are always willing to share. I remember, we processed our transcripts a little differently back in the day, and so when people wanted to read and sign it, we in South Carolina have a sealed original law. And so we had these rooms full of these sealed originals. We had to track when the 30 days was up and if we got the signature back to send it out. And I remember one of the, Matt and Tiffany Alec told me, they said, you don't have to do that. You can just seal it and put a pouch on the outside and send the read and sign out later and build in the little affidavit on the back of the transcript. And I was like, gosh, you just saved us hours and hours of work and manpower. Why didn't I think of that? But they offered it right up.
Oh, that's so great. I'm totally, I mean, what a story about how we are better when we work together, right? Like, that's
Right.
just something so small is very monumental. And I love that so much.
Plus, you get to go to some cool places too.
Heck yeah, you do. San Diego, here we come,
I'm excited.
2024.
It's going to be a fun time.
It really is. There's going to be so many activities, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I think that honestly, I've kept you here for 40 minutes, and you and I both have holiday parties to get to. So I think that's a good place to wrap up with our amazing 2024 San Diego convention, just a few months ahead of us. We certainly hope to see all of you there. Thank you so much, Bill, for taking the time to chat with me. You're just delightful.
It's always a pleasure, Deanna. Thank you.
Of course. I will see you soon, Bill. Happy holidays. Happy holidays,
You
everybody.
too.